Hello friends, I'm Natalie Kunsman, MD, and today let's dive into what we already know. Today's topic is the skin microbiome, and boy, is this a fascinating, budding new topic. So there are common skin diseases that have manifestations based upon either the viral, archae, bacterial, or fungal triggers. So let me explain that, because a lot of these are very common to you, and yet we may not have made some of these connections. So let's start with viruses. I'll give a few examples. So for viruses, we may have herpes mouth sores. We may have HPV, human papillomavirus, molluscum or warts. We may have pox of various chicken pox or smallpox, and those skin manifestations of that. Then we have the bacteria. Some of us may know about Impetigo, which comes from the staph and strep family. A lot of us know about acne, and that is caused by P. acnes. Then we have some furuncles and boils, and those are from mixed bugs that come from the skin tract. Then we have fungal infections. We have fungal toenails, which may come from mixed fungi. We have athlete's feet, which come from candida species. And then we have dandruff, which comes from the Malassezia family. So here we go with some of the budding research and late-breaking information that we have so far that I cannot take credit for this, and I will give the credit to some brilliant PhD researchers at the NIH, and in particular, Julia Segre, who was presenting at a Hopkins topic. So I'm trying to bring this information to you and make it as basic and fundamental so we can build upon it in the future as more of this information is underway. So there is research underway going after the human microbiome. And not that long ago, we were after the DNA sequencing, which has been finished. But now there's lots of information that has been discovered at the gut and internal level with these trillions of cells and trillions of organisms that actually outnumber the human cells that we have in our body. Now, I rarely talk about my personal medical investigations, but when it comes to the skin microbiome, this is of particular interest to me because over the past 20 years, I have had elusive flares of psoriasis. And I have always been trying to find the answers in the immunity, the skin pathogens or the triggers at the skin level, and the meridians that affect the distribution of my particular skin manifestations. And of course, other inflammatory skin issues, namely eczema, also seem to be the body's overreaction to some of the normal bacteria that live on our skin, such as staph epidermidis and strep species. Now, that said, let's explore what is already known. And to state up front, each bacteria, fungus, virus, all has its own particular genome and their own genes, and then they have their effect on our innate genes and may be a big portion of why some people have the conditions they do while twins or similar family members maybe do not. And we may even think that the microbiome in the human body will someday be considered yet another organ system because it is so massive. Now, our immunity is affected, and digestion is affected, and protection from other pathogens comes from these microorganisms that live within and on our skin. And today, of course, our focus is of the skin. So thousands of people thus far have been cultured from all different regions of their skin, and they have been tracked. So to be clear, it's not always easy to culture these organisms on a plate because they need certain environments to thrive on the skin. And even to that regard, that gives us a lot of information over what microorganisms need what environments to grow and survive. Now, if we note that there are portions of our skin that are either considered oily, moist, or dry, and even some of the Chinese medicine descriptions of rashes have described this for thousands of years. So there are certain bacteria and fungi that will thrive under these oily conditions, and some of us will suffer some nuisance conditions because of that. So for instance, one of those may be seborrhea or dandruff, which is an overabundance of the Malassezia critters that are living there. And then we have certain species that will thrive in the warm and moist conditions. And now thinking through that, it may make sense to you why yeast, candida, and fungal infections, for instance, will live under our sweaty feet and in the creases of our folds in more moist, dark environments. And then there is a sector of microbiota that will thrive in the drier parts of our skin. Now, some of that may seem very obvious, but yet we have never really pulled these pieces together. And we have noticed now, at least in our research, that we have confirmed that our skin microbiota is different than other mammalians. And then some of the anthropological evidence is really in its infancy to know if the microbiota is different from hundreds and thousands of years ago as compared to now. So the environment we create for these critters to live is influenced by such things as we live indoors, we wear clothing, and we wash with soap. And of course, comparing us to other mammalians, those practices have led to a less diverse population. So in other words, those mammalians who live outside have a much more diverse microbiome that lives internally and externally. And then we even have some differences, for instance, between C-section babies versus vaginal birth babies that acquire the mother's microbiota coming through the vaginal tract. And of course, we alter our gut bacteria and presumably some of the skin bacteria through antibiotic usage, diet, and for instance, one of those is shifting the Bacteroidetes to Firmicutes species as one particular example. Topical creams and environmental toxins will affect this. So what does all of this mean? When does a normal commensal critter become a problem? Well, we have mice studies who were made absolutely sterile, who had no bacteria or viruses, and they had very shortened lives fraught with a lot of chronic illnesses. So we are dependent upon the DNA and the protein sequencing that comes from these bacterial, fungi, and viral species. And we are gaining much more insight into the dermatologic world as to why some rashes appear where they appear on the body. And we are gaining insight into the treatment of dermatologic conditions based upon the presence and amount of microbes. So maybe some patients have different distributions of these microbes in certain areas of the body, and we may have a way that we may be able for the body to heal itself rather than steroids and harsh treatments if we can train or cultivate or change some of those ratios to be a much more friendly environment to allow good species to offset the bad species. Again, maybe we can use the microbiota to our advantage for certain derm conditions. And already we know that fecal transplanting, where we are transplanting other good host bacteria into a poor host gut, can improve a lot of conditions. And then I will also go out on a limb and insist that part of the skin's topography and ecosystem interplay between the environments, such as the oily, dry, and moist, and the meridians and our electrical grid to those certain areas do help make the optimal environment for some of the microbiome. So those certain biofields can also interplay that will help promote certain bacteria or kill certain bacteria in certain areas of those bodies and create a either wellness strategy for the skin microbiota or a treatment strategy for the skin microbiota. So again, this is budding information, and we are going to have to explore a lot more of this in the future as the top scientists and hopefully the top dermatologists are elucidating much more information. So gut bacteria is so much easier to measure, and we already have abilities to culture and figure out some of the gut microbiome, but keep your eyes peeled for more information on this topic as it becomes available. Again, I'm Natalie Kunsman, MD. Subscribe to my channel below, and until we meet again, be well.